Pentagon now appears to be preparing for regional spillover from the Syrian conflict, a scenario it had even recently viewed as remote. But as the U.S. inches closer to intervention, one major international roadblock still stands in the way, and that would be Russia. Well, John Kerry, our Secretary of State, was in Moscow this week attempting to address the problem. But will the Russians be inclined to act on Syria, something they've resisted thus far? Well, joining me for tonight's Q&A is Jonathan Schanzer, Vice President for Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Welcome. Good to have you.
Thank you very much.
So John Kerry met with President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin, and apparently the Russian president kept John Kerry waiting for 3 hours. The Daily Mail reports that the Russian president fiddled with his pen as John Kerry was speaking and personally did not mention the Syrian conflict. What do you make of this? How do you interpret this seemingly disrespectful treatment?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to note that the Russians are not allies of ours. They're adversaries. They're not necessarily enemies, but they're definitely not allies. They've been working at cross purposes with the United States, not only with Russia, but also with Syria, but rather with Iran as well. Of course, the Russians have been providing the Iranians with elements of their nuclear program. They've been working against the will of the United States for quite some time on this, blocking efforts at the UN, and basically disregarding our wishes when it comes to the Syrian conflict. So I'm not surprised to see that the Russians are not exactly responsive to our needs. As far as being disrespectful, obviously we don't know exactly what happened, but certainly it didn't look like he was laying out the red carpet for Secretary Kerry.
So Jonathan, what was Secretary Kerry's goal in meeting with Sergei Lavrov, the foreign defense minister, and President Putin?
Well, the goal was to work out an agreement with the Russians so that we could bring an end to the conflict in Syria. In other words, now that we've got the specter of chemical weapons floating around in the country, we've got Hezbollah fighting there, we've got Al-Qaeda fighting there, we've got the Israelis bombing targets there. There's this sense that we may have hit sort of a critical moment in this Syrian conflict, and the United States knows or rather this White House knows that we're going to need the Russians in order to bring this to a close. It's the Russians who've been standing in the way on the international stage, and in fact it's the Russians who've been really defending a key town, a key port of theirs on the coast of Syria, and that's the town of Tartus, which is a critical area for the Russians to deliver weapons to the Middle East. So
there does seem to perhaps have been some progress made. John Kerry made an announcement alongside of Sergei Lavrov about potentially an international conference that could happen at the end of this month. I want you to take a listen to our Secretary of State.
The alternative is that Syria heads closer to an abyss, if not over the abyss, and into chaos. The alternative is that the humanitarian crisis will grow, and the alternative is that there may be even a breakup in Syria.
So do you think progress was made between the U.S. and Russia in trying to address the Syrian conflict?
I highly doubt it. I think that even if there is an international conference that takes place, I don't think that the Russians are necessarily going to agree to any of the things that we're going to call for, and primarily that's going to be that the ouster of Bashar al-Assad, and the Russians are already absolutely committed to keeping him in power. They want this regime to stand in place, and so I don't think they can walk away from that after now contributing to the violence and helping Assad stay in place after killing 80,000 people and displacing millions more.
All right, Jonathan, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.